The second piece is your privacy policy. And you really cannot be in business and be online these days and not have a privacy policy in place. This is really, really key. This fulfills your obligation as a business owner to disclose what are your privacy practices, what information do you collect, why do you collect it, how do you keep it safe, right? Under the GDPR, you have to have a legal basis for collection.
Welcome back to SEOleverage.com. My name is Gert Mellach. This is episode 97. And today we want to switch gears a little bit because we usually talk about SEO strategies, conversions, all those kinds of things. But really little makes sense if you don't have the legal protection that you actually need. So now I think lawyers and dentists have a lot in common. You really only consult them when you're in pain, which is probably not the smartest thing. So I'm really happy to have today Heather Pearce Campbell with me, a legal expert, as we're going to find out. Welcome, Heather.
Thank you. It's so great to be here. Your introduction is true. People often don't cross my path until they've got a significant problem, right? And that's just how it goes. Certainly, there are opportunities to be proactive, but mostly people reach into legal just like a dentist if they really need help or they're having pain or they're worried about a problem.
Absolutely. I think you're definitely the ideal person to break the ice here a little bit for our audience. So I'm looking forward to this. I do want to mention, obviously, we got introduced by James Remco a while ago. I had the pleasure to speak on your podcast, Guts, Grit, and Great Business. By the way, really recommendable for a run. I usually listen to it when I'm on a run and really enjoy the stories and get some inspiration there. You're the founder of Pearce Law PLLC, and over at legal website Warrior, work with entrepreneurs helping to protect their brands and provide legal support, legal information, lots of free resources as I've seen as well. I want to really jump right in and ask you, what was the most challenging case you were working on?
Oh, goodness. I'll first start out and say so much of what I enjoy about what I do is the variety, right?
Yeah.
So any client that shows up to my door that has a problem considers it a major challenge in their business, right? And so whether it's, for example, and it could be, this is the interesting thing about legal challenges. They can show up in ways where we have somebody who we consider just, air quotes here, an opponent on the other side. So for example, lots of IP infringement, right? I had a gentleman who's a previous client show up again, and we had a long chat about an IP scenario where, and the interesting thing about this is this was years in the making. Years ago, he dealt with this person, had actually sold a portion of his business to them. Under the terms of the agreement, they were going to be paying royalties and some rent and some other things to him until they paid up, right, to the sales price. Didn't happen. They fell down flat, never made the payments. And basically, they ended up in arbitration, and he essentially let her walk away, right? Because otherwise the alternative was sending her into bankruptcy. And he really didn't want to do that. He had a set of personal ethics that was I don't want to do that. So let her off the hook. And he absorbed that loss into his own business, which took a couple of years to recover from. And even after that, here we are years later, and they had a couple of exchanges in the interim where they agreed she no longer would be paying royalties. She was going to walk away from all of the IP, right? The intellectual property that had been traded hands. And so that allowed him to recover some of the losses, etc. Guess who's still using the IP, right? He learns now, many, many years later, she is still teaching several courses 100% based around that original IP that she never paid for, walked away from. He took the whole loss. And so he has a whole new situation now on his hands because he's at a new phase of business where he is repackaging that IP and doing some new and interesting things with it. And the thing that is very insightful about this scenario is, one, it's just a real life example of the ways that these problems crop up and can bite us, even when we try to do the right thing. This is what can be so painful about business is even when we have ethics, even when we make decisions that we feel like are the right decisions, we still can't predict what somebody else is going to do. And her lack of ethics is now his problem.
Absolutely,
right? So that's often where I start, actually. And I joke, and I've said it several times on my podcast, a big dose of ethics would solve all of these problems. Truly.
Absolutely,
And and mostly what gets people into trouble is either their own or other people's ethics.
Yeah, you just expect other people to have the same requirements, personal standards. And standards, even if they're aligned at the beginning, might change over time, and especially when money is involved. Yeah.
Oh, that part, especially when money's involved. And the other thing that often surprises people, and like you, Gert, I support a lot of coach creators, professionals, service-based business coaches and creators, but they often live in the same bucket. Consultants, right? Professional services and other service-based businesses. And the thing that is fascinating is that I'm working with people day in and day out who have really poured their heart, their time, their energy into what it is that they're building and creating in their business. And so when they go to enroll people in their services or in their course, they expect like, okay, this person is paying. They obviously respect what I do. They think they're fine. They think like, okay, I don't need terms of purchase or website terms and conditions, or, I've got great clients. They're paying me. We're all good. Often it's those very clients that went through that course, went through your program, got exposed to your IP that turn around on their own journey, their own business building journey, and start using yours. Copy the name, copy the concepts, copy the framework, right? And it can start anywhere. And it can start with the clients inside your business.
Interesting but scary, obviously, right?
Yeah.
Where it seems like to start, like you mentioned, okay, they might just take your things. I think a lot of people have an issue understanding what IP really means. What is, if I'm an online course creator, is this only like my videos, my training materials? So how would you explain what IP actually entails?
That's such a good question. Yes. And so what is IP, right? IP stands for intellectual property. And it really is, for the folks that I serve, it is the core of their business, right? The value of their business. And people often get this wrong. When I speak, I'll ask, what do you think if you were to do a business valuation today? What percentage of that valuation is based on your IP, right? And I get guesses all over the place, 20%, 30%, 50%, 70%. It's like 90, 95%, right? And for some of the businesses, because they're all information-based businesses that I support, it's almost the vast majority because they have very little equipment or, actual physical assets related to their business. So understand that IP is your business. You are in the IP business. And most people that are in these businesses that we've just described, they really are delivering a variety of services. They're publishing. I call them information publishers, right? Because usually they're writing articles online, publishing blog posts, even social media posts that are really extensive, let's just call them arms of their core content, right? They're laying out and teaching concepts and informing their audience of their expertise. And so they're massive information publishers, like micro publishers, right? But they publish a lot of information. And then basically all of their services, their coaching services, their consulting services, and the way I distinguish between those two things, coaches generally are working with individuals. They're coaching on some topic. They're working with individuals. Consultants are working B2B. They're working with an organization or a business, right? Consulting teams, leadership, etc. But many of my clients are both coaches and consultants, right? They might work with different clientele. Those services are all based around their IP. Often they're speakers as well. They might be writers. They might be self-published. They might be published through the traditional world. All of this involves IP. Right? Your website involves a ton of IP, all of the creative content that goes into even your marketing, right? Your marketing material, etc. So it's understanding that IP is really the brain power that you
I was going to
express.
say is like something somebody has thought of in this company and puts out in whatever way, right?
Exactly. And put down in some form. So when we talk about IP, it helps for people to understand the protections that go along with IP so that you know kind of which bucket they fall into, right? And usually people are thinking about trademark registrations, copyright registrations, and then you have trade secrets, which are intellectual property that you put down inside the company and does not get exposed to outside eyeballs, right? That's why it's a trade secret. Internal proprietary system or methodology or something else. And so that's why it's called a trade secret. You don't file for copyright protection of that because that exposes it to the world. What you do to protect a trade secret is put a non-disclosure agreement in place for your employees, your staff, right? Maybe if you're working with a consultant or even a joint venture partner, you're going to put non-disclosure agreements in place to protect any of that internal IP that gets exposed in that process. And then the final component, which it's last, but it's definitely not least, people should often start here, is using general business contracts as the gatekeepers to their IP. And what I mean by this, so you have the registration protections, right? You've got non-disclosure agreements to really keep trade secrets secret. But you have this wide array of business contracts available to you to help protect. It's like the front door of your IP. So let's pretend you're a course creator and you're selling an online course. Having website terms and conditions is going to help protect your online content and IP that gets exposed to the world at large, that doesn't live inside of a course, it's just on your website. Terms of purchase, though, you can put language down inside of those terms of purchase that apply to anything that you sell. So for example, everybody's familiar with the iTunes check the box or any checkout system, right? Where they're like, I have read and agreed to the terms of purchase. That's what I'm talking about, right? And you want to have those in place, and you want an active mechanism where somebody is checking the box and acknowledging them, and you track that so that once they're inside your program or your course or your services, whatever that online sales funnel leads to, they've acknowledged the terms that apply. And just for reference, the amount of information that gets covered for the types of businesses that I protect inside of those terms of purchase, it's like a 10-page document. So it's covering everything from refund policy. You don't know it's 10 pages because you're scrolling and it goes quickly, right? But it's a beefy document. You're covering limitations of liability. You're covering certain disclaimers that are saying, look, even though I'm an expert in, let's say, the financial world, I'm not giving you professional financial services advice, right? So certain things have to happen under a license. Let's pretend you come from the medical world. You probably need a disclaimer, not only in your terms of purchase, but on your site in general that says, although I'm a doctor or I come with this training, I'm not giving you personal medical advice. Right? So we need the clarity of this language to help people understand how they can use our information, what they can and can't do with it, and to help limit our liability and our risk on the back end. Because here's the thing I always tell people is that you can know how you intend for people to actually use the information, but ultimately, you don't get to control how they actually use it.
Right.
And that's where the risk comes in the door.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes a lot of sense. It just really closed those potential. You don't even know. I remember when I had my terms created by a lawyer a few years ago, it was really, they had like really good ideas what could happen, which I really did take into account, right? My moral standards.
You're like, thank you for all the horror stories.
Absolutely. I had a couple of sleepless nights afterwards, but then I'd still do this. But it's really, I think where the experience then comes in with a lot of sections there where it's like, I would never have thought this is something. Obviously, in our case, SEO is not something we can control. So we always have like those cool agency competitors that give guarantees, and I don't know what their terms say. Where we definitely can't give these kinds of guarantees, but obviously, it's something that probably nobody reads, but you want to
Yes.
kind of be able to prove that you had this in place, that they had ticked this box and it is covered, right? Is there a
That's
difference,
right.
just as a question here, is there a difference if this is like a tick on a checkbox or a signed document? Is there a difference for service business? For example, imagine a coach where it's very common that they have some sort of signed agreement. Is there a difference?
Yeah, great question. So long as somebody accepts and acknowledges the terms, they're both binding contract. The point is, and what I tell people is you want to think about your enrollment process from a user experience standpoint, right? When somebody hits your site, whether they're coming to a landing page or through an email series, maybe they get invited to a sales page, whatever the case may be, does it make sense? And you look at the way that not only works best for your client, but optimized for your business. It's a balancing act between how do I want business systems to look inside my business and compared to what do I want the user experience to be like. Plenty of businesses will have online terms of purchase, check the box, for let's call it like a group membership program or low cost kind of a lead magnet, but something that you pay for a few bucks for or whatever to get inside your database, right? And you expose somebody to kind of the outline of your work and give them an introductory taste of what it's like to hear from you or work with you. Those low dollar things, you're probably optimizing for numbers, right? That makes sense to do that through a terms of purchase. Now, if you're selling somebody into a $15 or $20, even $10,000 coaching program, do you want to do that with a check the box? You think through that, like with that amount of money changing hands, probably you want a client who sits down and actually reads the terms. And the reason why is because with a $10,000 or $15,000, $20,000, $25,000 client, you're probably working with them more intimately, like in a one-on-one basis or maybe a smaller group basis.
Absolutely.
You want to make sure you have clients that care about the work and the process and are actually willing to take the time to read through that. Because one of the things that I do a lot of educating on is how do we use our business systems to help create the client that we want to show up? And the way that we do that is through examining our touch points, right? Where do we have contact with clients that we can help inform them about our business policies, about our services, that we're properly setting expectation? You don't want the enrollment process, first of all, to be a surprise or to have things in it that don't mesh with your earlier language, your earlier, enrollment pathway. So you're looking for consistency, you're looking for clear language, you're looking to optimize that path and take responsibility for helping to create a really quality client that actually enrolls. And you can use the legal process and the enrollment process to help do that.
I think the best examples I saw was like a mastermind. I think I signed up a while ago for 1 year, but they had like a two-step approach. They had their terms of purchase, like general, very quickly. Then you signed up, you made your first monthly payment, and then they send you the paper document, so to speak, right? So there was one document then highlighting like the most important points again. So you signed, and then you had even another document where you kind of then acknowledge that they are going to use you as a case study and stuff like that. So it was like very, very slow paced. So there was this document. If you sign this, now we need you to sign that document. Like you said, they kind of set a lot of expectations. They had like one document that pretty much only said that I'm going to commit to execute the suggestions that are made in this mastermind or contribute with my own. Like not even legal, but really based on the expectations. Whereas like it is not something I can legally enforce probably, but it just sets expectations.
But like house rules.
You put your signature below that and say, yeah, I'm really commit to this. I'm really all in, which we probably need to do for SEO to get people to execute a little bit more. And that, we definitely want to ignore. But yeah, it's interesting how very often the legal aspect of doing business brings up a lot of qualification as well, right? So it's like if somebody doesn't want to go through these documents, they're probably not a partner. I remember one of the first documents I signed for an international corporation. This was crazy. I was a freelancer and signed like a 30-page document where like I'm pretty much selling my soul here because I have no idea what I'm signing, but I want this project. But it was a standard practice, international corporation, read these. It was like 11 pages, fine print, definitely 30 pages at least. I even read it through because I had hardly any clients back then, and this was like mind-blowing. But yeah, it's interesting, all the cases and that people think about. What do you think, if I'm an online course creator, what would be certain things should have my students sign? Like on the one hand, on the website, what should there be on the website? So I can maybe check afterwards my website, is there anything missing? What kind of legal text should my students sign?
It's such a great question. And actually, your previous example brings up a really important issue around timing. When do people sign off on the terms, right? Because from a legal perspective, it actually matters. So the scenario you just walked through, although it felt good to have that pace of like, here's this, and then this, and then this, there are other ways that you can achieve it that are legally safer. And what I mean by that is you never want to sell somebody into a program or course and then present the legal terms. That's a big no-no, right? That really can be considered like a bait and switch kind of a scenario. And so the workaround is that, again, you look at your enrollment conversations, you look at the emails that nurture somebody into a particular kind of sale, you look at the language you're using in your webinar. Are you setting people up for success? And does the enrollment process, however that happens, reinforce some of the things you've already disclosed to them, right? It should work that way. But they should absolutely be exposed to all the terms prior to handing over you money, right? Because as soon as money trades hands, the court's going to ask, what did they know about that scenario at the point that they paid you for it? And if you have not yet exposed, so as an example, there's a high-end coach here in the States. He got quite a bit of notoriety because he went from like nobody really knowing about him to like running a $4 million business, annually, having big events, doing a lot of one-on-one high-level coaching. He had a $25,000, I want to say kind of mastermind scenario. And he had, like many of these businesses do, international clients. So when this particular person bought into his mastermind, like so many people doing it wrong, he did not have all the terms up front. There was no media release. There was no language saying we're going to record these calls and share them with other cohorts, of the same program later. So once they got inside and learned that, he had people dropping out, like saying, nope, you did not disclose this because I needed it at the time that I gave you the $25,000. You can't later tell me, oh, these are going to be recorded and you already consented to that when I didn't. Right? So the timing is really important. But to your point, how you nurture people along and help them understand the most important parts is you build those reminders into your follow-up email sequence. Hey, remember the terms of purchase that you signed or the client services agreement that you signed, at onboarding? Here's a link back to that document. As a reminder, here are some of the important provisions, right? So you want to outline what are the key policies, whether it's the communication standards of the group, whether it's expectations around attendance, whether it's the refund policy, whatever it is. You might have some core provisions that you post inside the group or you build into the email sequence so that people are reminded and they have that refresher, right? Because there can be a lot that's covered in these documents. Now, to your point, if you're a course creator, what do you need? Typically, course creators that I work with, they have a heavy online component. They're building a website that's optimized for enrolling people into a digital membership, a course, a variety of things that kind of look like courses. So you definitely want what I call your website protection in place. And this generally is going to involve your website terms and conditions. These are your general ground rules. They apply to everybody who visits your site, whether they purchase from you or not. And that's the key distinction between website terms and conditions and terms of purchase. People often get this wrong. They think like, oh, I'm just going to shove everything into website terms and conditions. Well, that could be confusing for people that don't purchase from you. If they show up and they're consuming your free content and you have conflicting language about your IP, it's not a streamlined way of doing things. And so you want website terms and conditions that apply to your general website, your free content. The second piece is your privacy policy. And you really cannot be in business and be online these days and not have a privacy policy in place. This is really, really key. This fulfills your obligation as a business owner to disclose what are your privacy practices, what information do you collect, why do you collect it, how do you keep it safe, right? Under the GDPR, you have to have a legal basis for collection. Most of my clients are subject to the GDPR because they have international businesses. So you need certain disclosures made inside this document. And there's really two pieces to that. You have to say what you do in regards to privacy practices and data collection, but you also have to do what you say. And businesses all often fall down with that piece, right? They collect some free template generator from the website. Online, some free policy that they found somewhere. They slap it onto their website. They think they're good. No, you're not. If you were to ever be audited or have a privacy issue in your business, you'd have somebody over your shoulder examining both your policies and your practices. And so that's where I spend some time educating my clients around the concept of monitoring data flows, understanding all of the data that makes its way into their business, putting secure measures in place to protect that data in regards to both people and processes, right? So whether it's automation or whether it's people with eyeballs on your data, how to really take care of it in light of privacy regulations. And most small businesses don't have that piece correct, right? Yeah. So that's part 2 of website protection. Part 3 is the terms of purchase that we talked about. There's primarily 3 functions that any small business does online. They publish information, right? That's website terms and conditions. They collect information. That's privacy policy. And then they sell information or they sell services based around their information. That's terms of purchase. You have to protect those functions. So your terms of purchase are unique to the services or the offering or the course or the digital product that you're selling. And there's a whole bunch of stuff that gets covered in those terms to make sure that, again, that you're creating an informed client, an informed customer, and that you've done your part to take care of them and take care of your business, take care of your IP, but also by putting those terms in place, taking care of your payment processor. Right? You're protecting yourself against future chargeback requests, right? And you can get bad marks from a payment processor and actually lose your ability to transact payments. So there's a variety of things that can go wrong, but those terms of purchase protect you in multiple ways.
It's so important, really. I had a big awakening years ago when we started to implement the privacy stuff here in my company with all the tools we were using. So all for every single tool, we had to figure out where is the data hosted. Is this within the European Union? Is this beyond? How is this data saved? Can we get their own privacy policy? I think we had to store on our end to know what happens with the data on this particular tool. And just by looking at the list of 20, 30 tools we were using back then, I think, and still are, it looks like a little bit of a nightmare. So you almost need to turn privacy into a hobby, I think, to just continue to keep this updated. And obviously an audit definitely helps to make sure that you have everything in place. But it's a lot of things that just don't get the attention they just require, I guess, right? Whereas it's a part of business. It's to be seen as one of the business expenses, I think, that you have to spend money, like you have to spend time on sending invoices and declaring your taxes, etc. You need to spend some resources here as well, and obviously work with someone like you who actually can guide on what is absolutely necessary just to protect yourself, right, against the main things. I want to not take too much time of you. I want to talk a little bit about brand registration, right? So I know a lot of people spend really big money on ads, for example, get the word out there, make sure their brand is a recognized brand. We see this then in SEO at SEO leverage when a lot of there's a high search volume around the brand, for example, hey, they have really done a really good job making this brand famous. They're pretty much synonymous for this coaching program or course, etc. What are the risks with not protecting your brand, and how can you go about protecting your brand?
Oh, this is such an important issue, and especially for people that are truly international, right? Because you take IP issues and the things that come up in your own native jurisdiction, and then you really, double and triple the complexity when you go international, because then you're reaching into other jurisdictions. And obviously I'm based in the States. And so most of my international clients that I work with are reaching into the US. And that's how we intersect, is because a huge portion of their audience, right, their database is based in the US.
Yep.
They have a lot of clients who consume their services, their information, et cetera. And so they are very interested in creating brand awareness in the States as well. Now, where this can go wrong if you don't do the proper research in advance, and we'll talk about what that looks like, is you can inadvertently, by not protecting yourself, step on other people's toes and end up infringing other existing brands. So it's really, you're killing two birds with one stone. It's a bad phrase. You're doing double duty, right? If you take the proper steps at the beginning to make sure that you're really setting your brand up for success. And what does that look like? It looks like at the very beginning of the journey, doing the research necessary to make sure you've selected a brand name that, particularly in the markets where you're going to be engaging in business, whether it's the UK, whether it's Australia, whether it's the US, that you have not selected a name that's already a well-known or registered, federally registered mark within those countries. Now, does that take a little bit of research? Sure, right? You have to know, but using the Google can get you a long way towards understanding this better, right? So I just tell people it takes a little time, not a huge amount of effort, but a bit of time to make sure that, and as one example, I had a client who failed to do this. They were Canadian based, reaching into the US. And US law on trademarks, by the way, which anybody who has clients based in the US and is reaching in needs to know, they can pull you in here for a lawsuit if you're doing business in the state. It doesn't require that you're geographically located in the States, it just requires that you're reaching in for clients in the States, right? So the bar is pretty low. He developed a brand in Canada. It really took off. And so he was advertising on Facebook. He's advertising on various social media platforms, which many of these small businesses do. Got hit with a cease and desist from a US based company, right? And that's where we intersected paths. He showed up to my door like, hey, I need help. This problem just came up, right? And we ended up having to basically negotiate the buyout of these marks from the US based company so that he could continue business here. Would it have been helpful for him to understand that or a little bit earlier in the journey? Certainly would have saved him some money and time and heartache, right? Nonetheless, that's just what you've got to be aware of, is really thoughtful around where you're going to be doing business. Are there existing businesses that have the same or similar brand name? This is where other people get caught up like, oh, it's not exactly the same. But when it comes to a registered mark, the standard is whether there is a likelihood of consumer confusion. So even if you're similar but not exact, there can be consumer confusion. Like the likelihood of infringement is significant in those scenarios.
You see this a lot in the affiliate space, for example, where affiliates might try to get away with like just using the same brand or a very similar brand, very close brand. Obviously, it's usually in affiliate conditions that you're not supposed to do this, and they have their own legal standards. But this is very, very common where an affiliate would just pretend they are the actual business rather than the affiliate, and trying to get away with like domain name variations and misspellings. We have seen all these kinds of things, but it's really interesting what they try, right?
Yes.
And the funny thing is, this isn't really a topic when you start out, because I'm not going to spend, I don't know, is this where this is in the price range right now? And I understand it also depends on how many areas, which countries you want to protect your brand in, etc. And I think you start in one country and then go beyond or something like that, right?
Totally. You just raised a really important point, which is where I recommend people start is basically analyze your audience. Let's pretend that you are 50% UK, 30% US, 20% Australia. Probably start in your home base. But if you were somebody who is like, look, my audience is 50 or 70 or 80% US, start in the US. Yeah. And the reason why is if you get brand protection here, you achieve a trademark registration here, you can take that registration and often speed the process in other jurisdictions, or at least before registering, because what happens is they will ask you, right, if you've got this mark registered anywhere else. And so if you do, and you've achieved brand recognition through a registered mark in the US, you're significantly more likely to be able to achieve that in other countries if it's not taken, right? I went through this with a client who, unfortunately, prior to working with me, he ended up with a mark, because the other thing people need to be aware of, there's a principal register here and there's a supplemental register. And so if you don't have a strong enough mark, you may end up on the supplemental register, which can cause problems with foreign registrations. This is also a reason not to try to do it yourself or have, a quote unquote, a friend do it for you or whatever. People try to save money in interesting ways, but the other reality is it's actually not that expensive. My trademark registration services start at $14.97, $1,497 US. For long-term brand protection, that's pennies.
Yeah,
that's
just
pennies.
thinking about the potential issues that could come up for not paying $1,500.
Yes. And that process is a 12 to 18 month process. And you have somebody walking you through it each step of the way, not doing it on your own, which has a tremendous number of pitfalls, right? So there's a lot of misconceptions around it's too costly or it's not worth doing. You guys, if you're committed to your brand, it's worth doing, and it's worth doing early and in the right markets first, so that you significantly boost your ability to protect that brand as it grows.
That's such good advice. I think we've learned really a lot. I appreciate all the detailed information. Obviously, we took advantage here a little bit to get some insights for the different businesses we work with as well.
I know.
But it was literally like more a masterclass than anything else. Heather Pearce Campbell here on episode 97 from legal website warrior.com. I want to briefly summarize. We talked about intellectual property, website protection, terms and conditions, very important terms of service, really making sure that you define the moment well when you collect the money and when you get this active approval. Obviously, privacy, always a topic in online business. And then really this topic of brand protection, I do know definitely for several of my clients are definitely neglecting this part. And the more important the brand is, it would just be a shame if they had to give it up or really like then negotiate like buyouts or royalty deals or something like this just because they didn't do this extremely important step. How could people get in touch with you if they now got probably scared to get in trouble with what they have been neglecting over time? What would be the best way to get in touch with you?
Right. And my goal is not to scare people. I really feel like information is power, and I just want them to have this information in advance of a problem, right? So don't be scared. Just like you mastered sales or marketing or anything else in your business, this is an area that you'll have to learn some basic information in, but there's folks like me that can really streamline that and make it easier for you. You can definitely go to my site, and there's tons of resources on my website. That's at legalwebsitewarrior.com, just how it sounds. Look for the link in Gert's show notes. But there's also a contact page. I'm on social media under my name, Heather Pearce Campbell. Pearce is Pearce, the Welsh spelling of it. And I also have, which I'm happy to mention, a free monthly call. If you join my list, I will invite you to that call. It's an Ask Me Anything live. For a lot of the time zones that I serve, it's still within, reasonable times. Right. If it's not, and you need support outside of that, get in touch, because we can set up an introductory call. You're welcome to email me. It's just heather@legalwebsitewarrior.com. But don't be afraid. Just put this on your list as one of the things that you're going to tackle this year. And I can help step you through the process. It doesn't have to feel like eating an elephant. It's, you can break it down and do one thing at a time, and I can help you assess what is the most important piece.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Heather. I'm going to link to legalwebsitewarrior.com and your other sites. And obviously they got great business podcast as well. Thank you so much.
Come find us over there, because Gert's on the podcast. He will be soon. So be
absolutely.
sure to
we'll link to the episode directly. Thank
Perfect.
you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure to chat again. And I hope maybe in the future we can dive into some of those topics a little bit deeper.
I would love to. Thank you, Gert. It's a pleasure to spend time with you.
Thank you so much. If you want to take this out, there's a written summary over at seoleverage.com/podcast. Find the episode 97 with Heather, and we're going to link to her services. And if you want help with your SEO, check out our quick audit, which is the best way to really get a first assessment. Get on a call with me. We have a quick chat, not too much about legal, but more about SEO. Everybody mind their own business and definitely get you up for success. Thank you very much.